This is Adventure Story by Neil Gaiman. In my family, adventure tends to be used to mean any minor disaster we survived, or even any break from routine, except by my mother, who still uses it to mean what she did that morning. Going to the wrong part of a supermarket parking lot and, while looking for her car, getting into a conversation with someone whose sister, it turns out, she knew in the 1970s, would qualify for my mother as a full-blown adventure. She's getting older now. She no longer gets out of the house as she used to, not since my father died. My last visit to her, we were clearing out some of his possessions. She gave me a black leather lens case filled with tarnished cufflinks and invited me to take any of my father's old sweaters and cardigans I wanted to remember him by. I loved my father. Couldn't imagine wearing one of his sweaters. He was much bigger than me all my life. Nothing of his would fit me. Then I said, "What's that?" "Oh," said my mother, "that's something your father brought back from Germany when he was in the army." It was carved out of mottled red stone the size of my thumb. It was a person, a hero, or perhaps a god, with a pained expression on his rough carved face. "It doesn't look very German," I said. "It wasn't, dear. I think it's from, these days it's Kazakhstan. I'm not sure what it was back then." What was Dad doing in Kazakhstan in the army? This would have been about 1950. My father ran the officers' club in Germany during the national service. None of his post-war army after-dinner stories had ever done anything more than borrow a truck without permission or take delivery of some dodgily sourced whiskey. "Oh," she looked as if she'd said too much. Then she said, "Nothing, dear. He didn't like to talk about it." I put the statue with the cufflinks and the small pile of curling black and white photographs I decided to take home with me to scan. I slept in the spare bedroom at the end of the hall, the narrow spare bed. Next morning, I went into the room that had been my father's office to look at it one final time. Then I walked across the hall into the living room, where my mother had already laid breakfast. "What happened to that little stone carving?" "I put it away, dear." My mother's lips were set. "Why?" "Well, your father always said he shouldn't have held on to it in the first place." "Why not?" She poured tea from the same china teapot she poured it from all my life. "There were people after it. In the end, their ship blew up in the valley because of those flappy things getting into their propellers." "Flappy things?" She thought for a moment. "Petrodactyls, dear, with a P. That was what your father said they were. Of course, he said the people in the airship deserved all that was coming to them after what they did to the Aztecs in 1942. Mommy, the Aztecs died out years ago, long before 1942. "Oh, yes, dear. The ones in America, not in that valley. These other people, the ones in the airship. Well, your father said they weren't really people, but they looked like people, even though they came from somewhere with such a funny name. Where was it?" She thought for a while. Then, "You should drink your tea, dear." "Yes. No. Hang on. So what were these people? And petrodactyls have been extinct for 50 million years. "If you say so, dear. Your father never really talked about it." She paused. Then, "There was a girl. That was at least 5 years before your father and I started going out. He was very good looking back then. Well, I always thought he was handsome. He met her in Germany. She was hiding from people who were looking for that statue. She was their queen or princess or wise woman or something. They kidnapped her, and he was with her, so they kidnapped him too. They weren't actually aliens. They're more like those people who turn into wolves on the television. Werewolves?" "I suppose so, dear." She seemed doubtful. "The statue was an oracle, and if you owned it, even if you had it, you were the ruler of these people." She stirred her tea. "What did your father say?" "The entrance to the valley was through a tiny footpath. Now for the German girl, well, she wasn't German, obviously, but they blew up the pathway with a ray machine to cut off the way to the outside world. So your father had to make his own way home. He would have got into such a lot of trouble. But the man who escaped with him, Barry Anscombe, he was military intelligence, and hang on, Barry Anscombe used to come and stay for a weekend when I was a kid, gave me 50 pence every time, did bad coin tricks, snored, silly mustache." "Yes, dear, Barry. He went to South America when he retired. Ecuador, I think. That was how they met. Your father was in the army. My father told me once that my mother had never liked Barry Anscombe. He was my dad's friend. And," she poured me another cup of tea, "it was such a long time ago, dear. Your father told me all about it once. But he didn't tell the story immediately. He only told me when we were married. He said I ought to know. We were on our honeymoon. We went to a little Spanish fishing village. These days, it's a big tourist town, but back then, nobody had ever heard of it. What was it called? Oh, yes, Torremolinos. Can I see it again? The statue? No, dear. You put it away? I threw it away, said my mother coldly, and then, as if to stop me from rummaging the rubbish, the bin man already came this morning. We said nothing then. She sipped her tea. You'll never guess who I met last week. Your old school teacher, Mrs. Brooks. We met in Safeways. She and I went off to have coffee in the bookshop because I was hoping to talk to her about joining the town carnival committee. But it was closed. We had to go to the old tea shop instead. It was quite an adventure.